160, 160, I wish, 68 energy a year. But that'll do. I'm not an energy reliant empire. It's not the backbone of my power to have a big cash income, energy income. Certainly not a research based faction by a long shot. Quite the opposite. So it's actually a decent income, and all of it focused in my headquarters pretty much. My inefficiency level is pretty solid. So that's my headquarters, and it's 23 energy. Maximum economy, fundamentalism, it's the current tack. So I've got nice ripping probe teams who are all commandos and elites and the like. Angry probe teams, and plenty of cash to bribe enemy units with. They get increasingly more expensive as we go. So I've got a bit of a fund saved up. The bribery fund, particularly important defensively because my PSI Corps rely on access to a solid bribe fund to defend my coastline from anything but worms. And my boats are very fond of my probe team boats are also high level, lots of commando and elite boats. I also rely on my cash supply for defence to some degree. They'll bribe enemy boats, etc. that might otherwise attack them. Very handy trick. Yes, I've got the full array of terraforming that I can do now. Can do it all with the weather paradigm and its miraculous powers early on, or you can wait until you get the tech. I could raise the land if I thought massive pollution was in the offing, global warming issues. Then I'd be thinking, raise up the land, build pressure domes. I may do some aquifer drilling. My formers are still pretty busy. There's lots of mines to be built. There's still fungus to be removed. There's still forests to be planted, but I might drill myself a new river or two at some stage, maybe in the desert here. There's already some rivers over this way. Nice central location. Create some rivers. That'll give me more hydroelectric power for my headquarters to slurp up.
Request confirmation.
Yes. So I basically have a massive mineral supply. These mines with roads on them supply 4 minerals, and the forests will supply 2. And because I've got so very many cities, I can grab a lot of these minerals and not create any pollution. The limitation of having a big city with a lot of production is, of course, that it's a polluter that will cause global warming. And I'm proudly smug of the fact that my cities don't cause any global warming, because I keep the mineral production under control. I've only got 4 cities with seriously boosted mineral production. I've got other cities that have been perked up a bit, some cities that haven't. But my 4 main producers all have mines or possibly even just forest minerals being pumped into them to make them more productive, like this shipyard here is. Pumping the supply crawlers, 15 minerals it has naturally at the moment. It produces me a boat in 3 or 4 turns. Crack in a few of those crawlers and a buyout, which I can easily afford. I've got myself a fairly solid little skin boat every turn. When you can manufacture a military unit every turn from a factory or 2, that's when you can build up a serious military force. Great thing about micromanaging supply crawlers is they're very flexible. If I get nukes and I suddenly decide I want nukes, or my crawlers zip into my nuke factory, power my nuke along. Whatever I happen to need a boost of, if I've got a new building to build in a particular place, I just throw crawlers at that place till my new thing is built. So it's massive mineral-based production without pollution and with great flexibility. The downside is micromanagement. Lots of extra button clicking, but they let you kick so much ass that I think they make the game shorter. Quite frankly, you need less turns to do things, you get more done per turn, so I don't think the ultimate amount of clicking you do goes down by that much. A unity foil? Can't allow any unity. Wow. I can smell peace in that direction. The stench of peacemongery. I think Lau, maybe Santiago. What else is left? I already know where Yang is. So Lau is sometimes the second best researcher after the university. It's mostly because he prioritises research, I think, to some degree, or energy, one or the other. But it tends to depend on who has a good start and who gets gifted with land in these situations. So Yang will have some decent tech because he's got resources. And I don't mind angering Yang. I will steal his tricks. Attack Colonel Santiago. Oh, hello, there's been a major shift in the who's who, check it out. Check that out. I've got new tech that I can take from the Colonel, but I have been mass producing a military and it has paid off. I'm not sure if the other powers at this point will be able to get back in front of me military-wise. I'm kind of rolling out a bit of a navy here and enjoying it. I feel like my tech is super slow, and normally by this stage in the game I'd probably have aircraft, but my isolation and general tech incompetence means that I'm a total Luddite, don't have them. So the resources I'd normally be spending on making sure I have an air force, I am doubling down on a navy.
Production complete.
So, I need to go and find some friends. I need to find my friend Santiago and relieve her of her terrible, terrible burden of knowledge. I need to find Lau and just generally play with him. Lau is just a toy. Just a silly thing to tinker with. Don't know the last time I saw Lau really powering along and being a bit of a champion of any kind. 34. That's gotta be maximum. The shoe is horned. I can't see any more bases being squeezed on here. Oh yeah. Got me a grid. Got me a serious grid. Yep. 34 cities. I can conquer the world with 34 cities. I've conquered it with less, I'm very sure of that. I was digging through some of my save games recently, and some of my ancient noob games from decades ago were most amusing and very lacking in cities. Very lacking. I think I was seeing those efficiency warnings and just thinking, wow, I can't possibly have more than 9 cities. That would wreck things. But vast grids of madness isn't for everyone. Doesn't suit everyone's playstyle. Probably doesn't suit every faction. Dare say I would play every faction this way. University, yeah, could do. Might be a bit slower building up to this, but I could play University with well spaced out cities the old school way. I could see that happening too. But Spartans grid, Believers grid, Yang definitely a grid. Morgan, I don't play a lot. I tend to do energy tactics with someone else who can put the energy to better use. But I don't know why I couldn't go a grid with Morgan. I'd definitely try it out. Who does that leave? Gaians on a grid? Yeah, why not? University and their network nodes might not be suited to a grid because the ultimate inefficiency, and they want a nice supply of energy. Still, you could go a grid and just go for the paradigm economy. You could just go nuts getting efficiency and then you can have a big grid like this one. Like if I cranked up a paradigm economy on this grid, I would have a pretty good energy income, pretty low inefficiency really. You can get away with a lot with a paradigm economy, a lot. I've got a lot of cities, but because of the grid, they're not that far, most of them aren't that far from the HQ, which is what inefficiency is based on. You could, yes. I've never really done energy grid shenanigans. It's just too straightforward to use formers to redistribute your energy and your minerals. So much so that I rarely, if ever, redistribute any nutrients with my crawlers. It's almost a little bit redundant as to where my population are. Most of them in my factory where I need production doesn't necessarily matter under this regime, so people can settle where they like. If it's picturesque, they like the scenery. Pretty much my whole population lives in little country towns. That's how we roll. Tree-loving, religious hippies who like to plan our economy and staple one another's foreheads. And then of course there's war. We all love war. That's what we're gearing up for, that's what we live for. We're spoiling for a fight. And that's where it's at. It's time to find some new victims. We've rolled the university and taken him for everything he had. It's time to slap all the research out of Lau and the rest of his friends. Slurping is the official term for sucking resources out of the ground. It's only in my own sheer incompetence that I use it to also refer to slurping research out of another faction. That's just me and my overuse of the word slurp. Running out of fungus. And it's not a sad day. It's not sad to see the last of the fungus on my great continent disappear. Firm believer that all fungus belongs in a lab, being studied under microscopes. Absolutely no need for wild fungus or sea fungus. Got a little bit of kelp growing around my borders. Kelp is good. I saw some kelp in the south that was bulk kelp that's been migrating in from overseas across some sort of sea shelf, which indicates that there's civilization to the southeast. There. Well, that kelp, I didn't plant that. Either it came from a pod I cracked open, or it came from my neighbour. Either. Could just be a pod I cracked open. I crack open a lot of pods. If you go exploring with transport boats and you open pods and the pod has an alien artifact, you can bring it home. If you open a sea pod with anything that isn't a transport, your alien artifact falls in the water and goes glug, and you lose it. Still, it's a lot of fuss, so I end up just grabbing the sea pods with whatever's opportunistic. Giants. Lal and Giants, I think, yes. Yes, see those dots those are Lal border dots. There'll be a Lal city
Production complete.
in that little inlet there.
Production
Be a great
complete.
city for stealing
Production
tech from.
complete. Production complete.
And that Gaian city I just found will be a nice one for stealing tech from. Hopefully I'll be back at the top of the tech tree as a result. I seem to be at the top of everything else. I'm at the top of population. 34 little towns. Hello UN. Yes, my 34 little towns has more population than everyone else's metropolises or metropoli, whatever they officially are. So that puts Santiago on the tech, so I need to borrow her missiles. I know that that's missiles among other things. I've got the military, I've got the pop, I've got my cash fund, and I've got the overall lead. This is why we invent ways to make life harder when we fight the AI. No secret projects. Intense rivalry. Transcend difficulty. How do we make it a little trickier? Make sure that these computer players give us a run for our money.
Request confirmation.
Would have preferred a bit more land to play on. I think the computer's a bit better at conducting a land campaign than it is doing any kind of amphibious landings on you, but still. Grab that research. Always just, I'm not interested in blaming anyone else. Maximum efficiency. Nice. Vendetta upon me. It's almost as if everyone hates Miriam. Ah, the subject of such hatred. It's fun to be a Miriam. So, 2 victims sighted. Prepare for Operation Slurp Dry. There I go again. It's all about slapping something. It's how the believers roll. Believers, yes.
Request confirmation.
To some degree, this is how you have to play the believers. I don't mean city spam and grids necessarily, but obviously probe team spam is their thing. That's what you go for. And once you realise that they don't have any mineral upkeep, then you get that you can just leave cities building them for vast periods and just pump them out, have them lying around. They're just super handy to have lying around. And then there's the workshop and building your own probe boats. It doesn't give you them automatically and suggest, why don't you go probing at sea? You can make a probe battleship that's faster and can strike from a greater distance, but it's also more expensive to lose.
Enemy project initiated.
You can't build a probe needle jet.
Complete. Production complete.
Probe needle jet is not a thing. You can build a transport needle jet that can transport one troop from base to base or air base to base, but you can't do a probe jet. You can also do an anti-worm jet.
Terraform complete.
They're not too expensive. They're just the ESP empath power up so that you have more psi attack, and you don't need to give it a fancy weapon, so it can be cheap, but that restricts it to a worm only roll, whereas if you do give it a solid weapon, then you can potentially use it to pick off probe teams and lightweight troops as well, if you feel like it. Worm jets are definitely a thing. Fast response to worms. You spot a Isle of the Deep out at sea, bang, you go out and sink it before it lands. Horrible annoying worms on your coast. Or fungus that just sprouts up in the middle of your land and worms with it. So you just swoop in and whittle down the worm numbers straight away with your anti-worm planes. They're just high speed, long range, cover a lot of area, attack power. Plus it's worth always thinking in attack terms when you're dealing with psi. You always want to be the attacker if you can. And it's also worth thinking the same when you are the believers, because you've got your fanatic bonus that only applies when you attack. So with the believers, you always preemptive strike, you always want to be on the offense. And you always want to check your supply crawler locations and make sure that nothing else is slurping them. At least in this version, it will crash horribly, horribly if I try and multi-slurp something. I have two supply crawlers here, which is very bad and very confusing, but it's alright. One is sent here, the other one is just travelling through. It's a nervous sort of thing to see, to look down and see the list of things and have two supply crawlers on one square. It's not something I normally encourage happening. Look at all these wonders, by Jove. Time for some heavy duty stapling. Don't spend that much time stapling, it lasts about 10 turns. And so early on, it feels like you're doing a lot of stapling. 23 ships. I think we can wind this one up, having established, hang on, 23 good ships, 4 average ships. I got 27 ships plus probulators, 14 of those, 51 supply crawlers. So yes, unit-based tactics more than bases and buildings.